The Sony A7V is one of the most hyped hybrid cameras that Sony has released in a long time. But after using it now for the last 60 days, then I can tell you right now that it might not be for everyone. You see, I've been reviewing and testing cameras professionally for the last 9 years, and in this video right here, my friend, I'm gonna tell you what this camera does incredibly well, where it still falls short and what I don't really like about it, and why I think a lot of people are gonna buy it for the completely wrong reasons. Alright, so over the last 2 months or so, I've been using this camera as my main camera for both photos and videos, and it is without a doubt a pretty sick hybrid camera and a true powerhouse. I mean, the thing that it packs inside is just crazy, but it's not perfect, and later on in the video I'll dive into the things that I'm not quite happy with or that it can improve on. We can look at the positive things, you know, improve on this, Sony. Also, this video is not paid by Sony. I bought this camera myself with my own damn money, but I did review it when it came out. When was it launched? Like 2024, end of 2024. So then I had it for 2 weeks, and that body and that video is only lent to me. But this body right here that I've been using since January is mine. Now, there is a lot of things to dive into, and I'm gonna tell you everything, all the dirty little secrets. But my friend, let's just quickly start with the specs without diving too deep into it, because you can look it up yourself. But I do think that is nice to give us a little bit of foundation of what is actually inside here, you know? All right, so this camera right here sports a 33 megapixel partially stacked full frame sensor. It also has a new Bionz XR2 processor, as well as a dedicated AI processing unit. Now, I know that AI is a massive buzzword in this day and age, and although this might not be the thing that you buy the camera for, then it does offer you some cool things that I'll dive into a little bit later. Also, a cool thing to know is that this camera has a 4.5 times faster readout than the old previous version, the A7 IV. Then, of course, we have to talk about the big headline, and the main selling point of this camera is that it has 30 frames per second blackout-free burst mode. That is absolutely wild. That is the same as the Ferrari of Sony cameras, the Sony A1 Mark II, which cost ridiculous amount of money, and this camera has that. Now, it is worth noting that the 30 frames per second blackout free, it is on electronical shutter only. Another thing that is super cool as well is that this has pre-capture too. Stacking pre-capture and blackout free shooting, if you're into sports photography or wildlife photography or any type of photography where you're photographing something that moves super fast, in my instance it's often my crazy little kids, then it genuinely becomes kind of impossible to miss the shot when you have that. Now, the autofocus also has an update with this AI unit, and it is really good. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the video and what I found surprising about that. Then another thing is that it now has 16 stop of dynamic range, which is pretty damn decent. Also, it has a 5-axis inbuilt stabilization, and then the screen, it has this new origami type of multi-axis screen that goes in all different directions. This right here is freaking amazing. Up, down, like this, all different. Wow. It's like the next thing you can do is just have it float somehow with magic. That is like the next thing, the upgrade from this, because this is just sick. Now, when it comes to the video capabilities of this camera, it can film 4K up to 60 frames per second with full pixel readout, and it can film 120 frames per second in Super 35. So it's cropped when you go to those megapixels in 4K. Megapixels, I meant frame rates, of course. One thing that is also worth noting is that just like on the previous version, the A7 Mark IV, this is so hard with all these Sony names, but then the A7 Mark V, this one has also oversampled 4K footage. So this is actually 7K footage, then it's then downsampled to 4K, which is the reason why it looks just so good, and the crispiness and the quality of the footage is just beautiful. When I see it, I give him one of these. Mwah. So good, so good. Now, there is a ton more to it, and you can pull up a spec sheet yourself. But one thing that is also a cool upgrade is that now you can shoot up to 210 minutes of continuous shooting without the camera overheating. So they have improved the heat management of this camera tremendously, which was a problem on the previous version. But as I've understood, and full disclaimer, I live in northern Sweden, so it's really cold, and then I'm from Iceland, so I'm often there as well, so it's not really that warm where I come from, you know, and where I stay. But as I've understood, when you're in warmer weather and shooting, you should faint before the camera does. It should be that good. That's what I've heard. By the way, if you want to become a better photographer, then I sent out a free weekly newsletter. It's fun, easy to read, and packed with value, and it's totally free. You can find it in the description down below. Alright, what is it that I really like about this camera? Now, for the starters, I do think that the upgrades are pretty cool. Now, they're not perfect for everyone, and we talk about that in a second, but the 30 frames per second blackout-free shooting, it's insanity. It's so fast that if you're doing any type of actions type of photography, and then with the pre-capture like we talked about before, it's genuinely hard to miss. Like, it's pretty much borderline impossible. Also, coming from the previous version, the A7 IV, which is a camera that I hammered on for years, then the autofocus on this is just on another level. Now, granted, on the A7 IV, I'm pointing always there because it's there in the corner, but you don't see that, silly me here. But on that camera, the autofocus is incredibly good. But here, thanks to this new AI processing unit, it's so good. I was shooting in the mountains freestyle skiers, and this was the first time in my life where I was doing any type of action-based photography. I'm a landscape photographer at heart, and I do a little bit of street photography as well. And I don't know if you noticed, but like them mountains, they're not moving anywhere, you know? So I can just be there, really take my time and compose, but in wildlife or action type photography, it moves so fast. And these freestyle skiers, they're like total nut jobs because they were doing some crazy ass things, but they moved so fast. And I was using first a 300mm, the Sony 300mm 2.8. So it was so long, and I saw them coming down the slope, and I was just like, okay, how can I hit this? There's no way that I can focus, but the camera just nailed it. You see this shot right here? I don't know how. It just looks so good. I'm not as good as pulling focus, you know, but the camera made it so easy for me to explore this other type of photography. So that was really, really impressive. Also, this new screen here, although not perfect, it is so nice to have this multi-angle LCD screen. I mean, I'm a huge fan. I tried, you know, the R5, I think was that the first one that had it. And I was just, wow. I also tried the Alpha 9 Mark III, which also has it. And I've always been so envious and jelly. And I go back to my A7 IV, and I've been like, wow, this is so bad. But now, having this, so good. I'm a huge fan. That's just what I want to say here. Huge fan. Huge fan of this. And when it comes to the world of filming too, then having that 60 frames per second with full pixel readout is really nice. And then the option to have 120 frames per second, even though it's cropped, is also a pretty nice upgrade. We need, though, to talk about that in the section a little bit later. Also, another thing, I do think the colors coming out of the camera is a little bit nicer and something I've been really impressed with. They said that they've improved the auto white balance with this AI processing unit. Like, every time I hear this AI companies go like, I feel like it's just a buzzword and they trying to lure me somehow, that I go like, oh, AI, I need to buy. But it genuinely feels like this AI chip is doing, I have no idea what the hell it's doing, but it's doing something that makes this camera so responsive and so fast. And apparently it's also affecting the way that it deals with the auto white balance, because the colors are so nice and it deals with these tricky lighting scenarios much better. And this I feel a lot when filming. For photos, I'm shooting mostly raw, so it doesn't really matter that much. But when I film, because I film a lot of videos as well, then that is where I notice it a lot, you know. Also, another thing, just like with every other Sony camera that I have, I just feel like they're reliable as hell, you know. They're so sturdy, so nice, and I'm just super happy. Yeah, I know that some camera brands make cameras that are prettier or feel less clinical. Sony just does its job, you know. Sometimes I see a Fuji camera and be like, oh, damn, that looks so cool. If I would have that, I would look so rad, you know, and so hipster and like, yeah, works well with my turtleneck here, you know. But there is just something that it works and it's gonna do the job for you, you know? And overall, it does feel like a genuine update and not just like a tiny refresh. But it's not perfect for every style of photography that you're gonna do. Which brings us to, who is this camera then actually perfect for? And who might it then be a little bit less perfect for? Now, if you are a hybrid shooter, you do photos and videos, it's gonna be genuinely hard to find a better camera on the market. This camera is a true powerhouse and they've just jammed so much technology into this, and you're going to be happy. You're gonna think like, wow, this is nice, you know? Also, if you are just remotely interested in any type of wildlife or fast-paced action type of photography, you're getting incredible speed. As talked about before, 30 frames per second, blackout free with pre-capture. I mean, that's the same thing as the A1 Mark II. This is a really expensive camera, so you're getting that level of performance, but you're not paying that level of money. Super, super, super nice. But my friend, I do think that a lot of people will buy this camera because it sounds really fucking sick on paper. But if you don't actually shoot action, wildlife sports, or do a lot of hybrid work, you may be paying a lot of your hard-earned money for a bunch of performance that you simply don't need or won't use. I mean, as a person that is primarily interested in landscape photography, it's not a huge upgrade from the previous version. Of course, it has some nicer things that we talked about, and there is better dynamic range, but it's not that much noticeable. I mean, the rivers and mountains, they're not going anywhere. So I don't need that incredible speed. And if I weren't getting my money from using a camera, I might think 2 times before I get it. But of course, if it's not an issue for you, you're gonna be super happy, for sure. However, before you pull the trigger, then let's talk about the things that I do not like about it. And by the way, all of the photos and videos that I'm showing here in this video are all edited with my preset packs and with my LUTs. They're super easy to use, and they don't only speed up my workflow tremendously, but they also ensure a consistent tone that I really like. You can find it down in the description, and better yet, I've bundled together all of my digital projects. I'm talking all of my presets, LUTs, templates, guides, everything. The overlays as well, you know, and I'm not sure for how long I will run it. So you can find that also in the description down below. Now, up until this point, we've been praising this camera quite a lot, and some of you might be thinking and accusing me now of being a Sony fanboy. How dare you? How dare you? I'm a Sony fanboy, so I get that. But it's because it's genuinely pretty nice. One of the members in the Darkroom, which is an online community I run for photographers, he'd been shooting with an A6400 his entire time that he was into photography, and he just swapped from the A6400 to the A7V, and he's been messaging me like, bro, the level of performance on this camera is just it's so much better. This camera eclipses the A6400. So if you're coming from an older system, you're gonna feel some incredible performance boost. And look, I'm not getting paid anything from Sony. So the first thing that I have not liked about it is, of course, that it's quite pricey. When the A7 IV launched, they had it on like $2,000 something. This one, they bumped up to over $3,000, which puts it in a little awkward middle spot of a camera. So it is quite expensive, and it's just a little bit crazy to think about that an entry-level full-frame camera has gotten this freaking expensive. So that is something to keep in mind as well. Also, I do wish that the upgrades from the previous model for us landscape photographers and all of us who are into slower paced photography would have been a little bit better. Yes, we get a little bit nicer colors, we get better autofocus, and we get like slightly better dynamic range, I think like 1 stop or whatever. But we always say like more megapixels. The 33 megapixel, it's a nice middle ground. And then of course, if you go too high megapixel, you're gonna deal with more rolling shutter when filming, which is another problem that I have not liked. The rolling shutter, although it is better than from the previous version, again, I'm pointing at it right there, I'm just not pointing into the void, it's there on a tripod, then it's still not gone, which just tells us how horrible the rolling shutter was on the previous Sony cameras. But because of the faster readout, it is better and it's definitely improved. But Sony, improve it a little bit more for me, please. Another thing we have to talk about too is that I would have just wished if Sony had just given us a freaking 4K 120 frames per second full frame, not cropped. Of course, yes, I'm happy. Yes, thank you for giving me 120 frames per second and I can do that. But it's cropped, god damn it. And maybe they don't do it because then this camera is just, how can I say? It just becomes too good and it starts to overshadow all the other cameras. And they have to think about that as well, the lineup. And this is a business model for them. So they have to think about that. But that would have been sick. And then, even though I'm a huge fan of this 5-axis screen, then the quality of it, I mean, it's pretty bright and the quality is pretty decent, but I've seen from my friends who use different camera models. I think I was looking at a Nikon camera the other day, and the LCD screen was just better. So make this a little bit better as well, please. Asking you nicely. But the thing is, even if you have a powerhouse of a camera like this one here, then it still won't make you magically a better photographer, especially if your technique is off. You see, I used to suck at taking sharp photos until I learned this thing right here.